Hello and welcome to my studio. I'm Lars Kemp. I'm a rework designer. One of the pillars of my upcycling ethos is volume, and not just a puffy skirt or sleeve, but voluminous trim. Today I'm going to show you how to make covered welt cording. We can just call it puffy strap. How to source it, the various thicknesses, different ways to integrate it into your designs, just so you can get an idea of how useful it can be as a tool to unleash your avant-garde fashion fantasies. Let's get started.
Welt cording is primarily used for interiors like the piping on a sofa cushion that you can buy in rolls of 18 yards. My three favorite sizes are 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch. 1/2 inch is a little more refined and restrained, 3/4 of an inch is the size I use most often, and 1 inch is really bold and fun. Welt cording is cotton or polyfiber encased in a delicate mesh that can easily break, so I tape the cut ends with craft tape. I prefer to work with cotton because the polyester tends to be pretty stiff, but that could be useful depending on your project. For a puff belt like I'm making here, I suggest using cotton welt cording. I cut 90 inches of cording for a 90-inch long belt. To cover the cording, I highly suggest using a stretch knit fabric or maybe a stretch woven fabric. You'll really need that stretch in a later step. If you must use a non-stretch woven, I highly suggest adding another 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch to the width of your fabric strip. My knit fabric is not 90 inches wide, so I'll have to cut 2 strips. The width of your strips will depend on your cord size and the fabric you're using, but I usually add about 1/2 an inch to 3/4 of an inch to the circumference of the cord for seam allowance and some ease. For a 3/4 of an inch diameter cord, I'm cutting a 3-inch wide fabric strip.
Since I will be sewing them together to make them long enough, I could sew them together with straight edges, like, serge that, there we go, but I'm probably going to do it on the bias. And that way, it just is a little less, I don't know, chunky when it's serged together than if you did it at a 90-degree angle.
I serged the 2 fabric strips together on a 45-degree angle. You could also use a single needle sewing machine. And then I trimmed down the length of the fabric strip. Knit fabric will stretch during a later step, so you only need to add a few inches to your chosen cord length. I'm cutting this fabric strip 92 inches long.
Making sure the pretty sides on the inside, just going to serge all the way down.
If you don't have a serger, you can use a single needle straight stitch sewing machine. For knit fabric, I suggest using a ballpoint or jersey needle, a slightly longer stitch, nearly a 3, and a walking foot if you've got it. And when you get to the 45-degree angle seam that attaches the 2 strips, sew past it, reverse, and sew over it once again so it doesn't pop in a later step. Sometimes I put a big safety pin through the taped end before I pop it in the fabric tube and stitch them together in preparation for the next step. But you may find it easier to sew without a big diaper pin in your way, so you can leave it out and use a bodkin later. Now poke the taped cord end, with or without a safety pin, into the end of your tunnel of fabric and stitch a few times back and forth to secure it. Later on you'll be removing these stitches, but this step is essential because now you'll flip the entire thing inside out so the fabric covers the cord. Sort of turtleneck the fabric over the cord to start. If you didn't put in a safety pin or if it dislodges at any point, drop your bodkin down the tunnel and clamp it to the taped cord end inside. Either way, you'll be using the safety pin or bodkin as an anchor to guide the cord through the fabric tunnel. Now just scooch the fabric as you go. This process takes about 20 minutes. Water helps provide some friction, so dab your fingers in water occasionally. When the cord end is poking out, remove the safety pin or bodkin and keep scooching. You're about halfway done. When the tunnel is fully flipped, you'll probably have a really long piece of extra fabric tunnel at one end. The knit fabric stretches during the scooching process. You'll see that it's pretty tight near the other end. Using thread snippers,
Try to remove the stitches attaching the cord and tube. You'll probably have to cut the fabric away so the cord can now move freely in the fabric tunnel. To counteract this tension, we're going to sort of counter scooch it next. Drop your bodkin down the long fabric tunnel on the other end, clamp it to the taped cord end, and scooch the fabric tunnel the other way so the tension on the fabric tunnel is loosened throughout, and so you'll eventually have several inches of tunnel at each end. Now you can remove the bodkin. And then I'm going to trim, I'd say about 3/4 of an inch on each side, like left over. We're going to tuck it inward. And I'm going to be stitching a knot there and kind of pick up like the center and then each end, and it's almost going to fold in like that. And then once you pull that thread, it'll cinch up. Here are the little hot dog ends. Boop, boop. Here are some other puff cord project ideas. Hand sew it into a spiral bralette. Encase your fabric strip around the cord to make piping. Hand sew it along the edge of a garment as trim. Make straps for a tote bag 2 ways. Either make shorter versions of the puff straps, stitch it along the top several inches from the hot dog ends and tie a knot, or sew the raw cord ends inside the top of the tote. And last but not least, the dress I'm wearing. Just grab a knit or crochet shawl, wrap it around yourself, poke the puff strap through the front and back and tie knots, and you've got yourself a dress. Well, I think that's one for the books. Now go, any good thing. Sorry, again, it's going to be sexual. Come on, grow up, you pervs. Everyone's like, what are you talking about? This is just sewing, you freaks. No one's thinking that.